It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Property Podcast. This is episode 8080. I am Rob B. With me as always is Rob D. Rob, how are you today? I know I always ask you, and I know we always speak before the podcast, but I think it's just good manners.
It is, you're quite right. And yes, I am very well indeed. Thank you, Rob. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you.
Good, and very topical today, but not so topical by the time this goes out, but we've woken up to the news that Scotland is part of the UK still. Woohoo!
Yeah, it is. So we did an episode a couple of weeks back on the Scottish property market, and we talked about the impacts of Scotland going independent or Scotland remaining part of the UK. Although over the next few weeks, it may seem like a little bit of drama as Scotland try and bring more powers to their parliament, which I think will inevitably happen, just to what degree, still to be seen. But overall, I think the economy now is pretty safe. We understand where we're at going forward. That uncertainty has been removed. I think all markets, the pound, the FTSE, the property market will do fairly well for the remainder of the year. And then the big event, Rob, which we've not mentioned for a while, but we'll start talking about again very soon, is the next big economic event that we certainly know of is the pensions reforms in April, when suddenly people are in control of their pensions. And it seems inevitable that a lot of people will then move their money into property. So that's going to be a big event that we'll start talking about soon. But the Scottish question has been answered. I think that brings a lot of certainty to the market. So if you're concerned about the economy, I think generally you can say it's good news. If you're Scottish, you may disagree with me, or you may agree, 55% of you do. But I think now we know what's going to happen. Go back to the episode 2 weeks ago to listen a bit more about our opinions and what we discussed, and actually even investing in Scotland. If now you feel actually it's a bit more secure, I might look at there as an investment. Have a look at that and see what you think.
Yeah, big sigh of relief, I'm sure, for anyone who has already invested in Scotland. Because as you said, there's still going to be some uncertainty, but a lot more certainty than there would have been had things gone the other way. So that is relating to a recent episode. We've got a news story coming up in a sec that also relates to a recent episode. But just to tease you, coming up for the rest of this episode, we are going to be talking about property investment tips and advice, which sounds like a very general title for a topic. Isn't that what we do every week? But it will all make sense, I promise. And also, we've got a really good resource of the week that I discovered just the other day, and it's already come in extremely useful. All of that coming up. But first, our main news story this week is about those pesky EU people and their rules and what they're threatening to do next. This one is related to the episode we did last week about accidental landlords, and this is potentially a blow for any accidental landlords, because the EU is apparently bringing in rules that are going to regulate buy-to-let products for accidental landlords. The background to this is that if you get a mortgage as an owner-occupier, it's a regulated product, which means there are all kinds of rules that are not in place for buy-to-let products. The logic there is that if you're using a buy-to-let product, it's a business decision, so you don't need the same kind of protection that a consumer would do for a loan. But the EU is trying to put these measures in place for buy-to-let loans where it doesn't appear to be a commercial decision. So if you're stuck in a position where you need to move for work and you've not been able to sell your house in time, you have to rent it out. Previously, you'd be able to get a buy-to-let mortgage relatively easily. What the EU is proposing is that you're going to have the same measures in place that you would if it was a residential mortgage. One of the main things that means is affordability checks. This could be a major problem, because if you're in a position where you're forced to rent out your house because you can't sell it, and then you're in a position where you can't rent it out because of affordability rules, meaning you can't get a mortgage, then what are you meant to do? So all the details are really sketchy about this, but we'll link in the show notes to a story from the good old Telegraph, which sums it all up quite nicely. And we'll just have to watch how this one develops. So there's nothing to panic about yet, but I thought it was worth having in there as a news story, just because it does tie into that whole topic of accidental landlords. So you can find that story in the show notes, which this week are at thepropertyhub.net/new podcast. And hang on, I think I've just let the cat out of the bag with that URL there.
You have, Rob. Right. We'll move on from the politics, but if that one happens, I'm definitely eating my hat. I can't see our government allowing that one to come through, especially when you look at the proportion of members of parliament who are property investors. It's far higher than the national average. So that's definitely not going to be a vote winner. So although it's important to look at these proposals as they come through, some have a chance of getting through, but I would say this one is a bit more remote, but it's worth knowing about just in case. Rob, as you said, the URL gives away what's coming out this week. And our big news of what we've been working on is that tomorrow we've got a massive launch, a new podcast.
Yeah, so this is one that we've hinted at before, and we talked about it at the London meetup as well. But yeah, this is going to be a whole new weekly podcast. So the property podcast isn't going anywhere. Don't worry. That's still going to be here every Thursday. But also every Friday, there's going to be a new podcast called Property Investment Tips. So this is going to be a new short podcast every week, just about 10 to 15 minutes long. So what we're going to be doing is reading out some of the very best posts from the Property Hub blog, where we write, and we've also got a really talented team of guest bloggers. So a lot of people go over there and read those, but you might not have time to read them. You might prefer to listen instead. So that is the logic behind this new podcast. So episode number 1 is tomorrow, if you're listening to this on the day it comes out, or it's already happened if you're late. And we would absolutely love to get your support for it in the same way that you've so generously supported us with the property podcast.
This is something that sounds really simple, but we think you'll really enjoy, because we've enjoyed a similar format in a few other podcasts. Now, this format is quite new. It sounds like, well, we're reading blog posts. Really? Is that going to be entertaining? Is that going to be informative? Try it. Give it a go. Trust us even. Download it, because a lot of people like Property News Radio when it goes out, because it's very short, it's to the point, and you learn from it. Then that's what exactly the Property Investment Tips podcast is all about. It's about learning. Now, for me, I love blogs, but I'm a busy chap and I'm on the move a lot. So to sit down and leisurely read a blog would be something I would love to do, but unfortunately quite often lack the time. But that's where I can add value to my commute. By having the ability to listen to blogs on a move is absolutely fantastic. So trust me, try it. I'm sure you'll like it. The fact you're listening to this podcast already shows you like audio content. So I'm sure you'll really enjoy it. So we'd love you to get behind it. We'd love your support. I'm willing to beg, but at this stage, I'm not going to. But we'd really like it if you got behind the podcast. Give it the support you did with the property podcast launch. Because when we launched the property podcast, we had 0 audience. And you created this. You helped it grow and made it as big as it is. And there's a lot of people who started listening to us right from the beginning. And there's people who've joined us very recently. But if a fraction of you get behind this new podcast, then it'll be a great success. So please help us out. Please download it. That's the first thing. And then if you enjoy it, please leave us a review, because that will really help boost it on iTunes. I know we occasionally ask for reviews for the property podcast, but if you could sort of park that effort and direct it to the new podcast, we'd be uber grateful.
Yes, we would. So to do that, you can find it over in iTunes, and a nice easy way to link you over to iTunes to download the podcast and to leave a review is to go to thepropertyhub.net/pit. Property investment tips, you see, thepropertyhub.net/pit. That will send you straight over to the iTunes page, where you can subscribe, you can download, and you can leave a review. And just like on this podcast, at the end of each episode of the new podcast, we're going to be reading out a review. So if you do get in there quick, you can be one of the first ones, and you can hear yourself read out on the podcast very soon. So as Rob said, please do give us your support. Go over there, check it out, and see what you think. We've already recorded the first few episodes, and we really enjoyed recording them. So hopefully you'll enjoy listening too.
Okay, so back to this podcast. Our topic of the week, in celebration of the launch of the new podcast, we're looking at property investment tips and advice. Rob, do you want to give a bit of background on what we've put together here?
Yeah, so the idea is, as I've already said, we've got an absolute ton of really great posts on the Property Hub blog by us and by others. So for this episode, we've just picked out 5 of our favourites, 5 bits of property investment advice and tips that we've taken from the blog. So we're just going to run through 5 of our favourites, so you can learn some of the very best things that have been shared if you haven't read them before, and have a refresher if you have read them before. Rob, why don't you kick us off with the first one? Okay,
so the first tip comes from John Evans, who works at RMP. So if you've contacted RMP, you probably spoke to John. And John put a blog together about estate agents, and particularly on how to get estate agents on side. And this is a simple tip, but one that we often overlook in many aspects of life, and it's consider what the estate agents are motivated by when you're looking for a deal. This transcends across many different areas, but it's basically put yourself in their shoes. Now, I know that might be a dark thought to put yourself in estate agent's shoes, but I'm sorry, estate agents. I know we have lots listening, just joking. But do it, because think about what they want from this. So when you're going around, you're very wrapped up in your emotions if you're buying your own home. And even if you're looking at a buy to let, because when you're looking at it, it's hard not to get emotional. I know we've got many experienced investors who go in, make quick decisions and get out, but many of the listeners will go and have a look and start visualizing things and getting emotionally attached to properties to some level. Think about the estate agent who's showing you around. What do they want from this process? Well, they want a quick buyer, probably. They want to know the sale is going to go through quickly because they'll get their money. They're going to want to know that you're a sure bet. Because if they know that the money will come in and you're guaranteed to deliver, or almost as good as guaranteed to deliver, then they're more likely to weigh in your favour against somebody maybe who's stuck in a chain and needs a lot to happen for the deal to go through. If you understand that the estate agent wants the deal to happen, and if you're the easier option, they may favour you. I know they have to represent the buyer, but think about they get paid when the deal goes through. So they're more likely to favour you from that point of view as well. Also, that you're serious. I know that sounds weird, but they get a lot of people who come in and waste their time. Try and demonstrate to them that you're serious. So start to think about what they want from this. They want the security that the deal's going to go through. They want to know that you're serious. They want to know that the transaction's easy. And they want to know that you're going to be easy to work with as well. So all these things can help you get that deal. So put yourself in the estate agent's shoes. Think about what they want from this. Yes, technically they're meant to represent the seller. And they do, but they will only get paid once the deal goes through. So think about these factors. Think about what they want. Put yourself in their shoes, and therefore you stand a much better chance of getting the deal done.
Yeah, you do. It's not all about the money. And sometimes you might be unlucky. Sometimes you might do all this great work and build the rapport and give them exactly what they need. But they are representing the vendor. So if they'd rather take the speculative £101,000 offer rather than your absolutely nailed on £100,000 offer and they can have it in their bank account next week, there's not much the agent can do about that. But for the most part, their interests are aligned with getting deals done with certainty and getting them done quickly. And that's often what the vendor wants as well. If there are two offers on the table, it's far better for them to go for the one that's actually going to happen rather than suddenly collapse 2 months down the line. Even if that offer is slightly lower, they might still be smart enough to go for it. So definitely really good tips there from John. Okay, so the next tip comes from Graham Clark, whose regular blog is over at moneystepper.com, and he's kind enough to write posts for us as well. And this one is something that's going to help you save up for a deposit, and he calls it dream costing. So his idea is that because any money that you've got now, you can leverage. And over time, because of inflation, the real value of money is eroded. It means that any money that you spend now is going to be worth a lot more in the future. So he's calculated that any money you spend now, if you hadn't spent it, would be worth 60 times more in 40 years' time. So what he's doing is he's putting this to work basically as a tool to get the discipline to save up for a deposit. So his example in this post is if you buy a bottle of posh fruit juice when you're on the move for £3.50, you think, it's only £3.50, what the heck? But he then applies a multiple to this to work out what it would actually be worth to him in the future if he'd leveraged that money and inflation had taken its effect as well. And he calculates that in 25 years' time, that fruit juice would cost him £61.25. So that means he's a lot less tempted to buy it now when he doesn't need to, because he can think about how this is going to affect what he does in the future. And this is my kind of blog post because he's embedded a spreadsheet in the blog post. It doesn't get much geekier than that. But the awesome thing is that it means that it is hard to, if you're saving up, to get disciplined over small amounts of money. If it's a couple of pounds here and there, it just feels like, well, what difference does it make? I'm trying to save up 25,000. This is going to make no difference. But the idea of dream costing is that actually it might not seem like much, but over the longer term, it can add up to a lot. So if saving up is a struggle, it might be worth you taking a look at this blog post, having a play with a spreadsheet and getting a little bit motivated by it.
I love this blog that Graham's put together because I have to admit, it's something I've not really thought about in this way before. Because you think, £3.50, well, that's not a deposit, is it? And I can't really leverage £3.50 from the off. But that's not really the point. It's building it into a fund that can be leveraged. And I love the calculations that he's done. I'm a numbers guy. I love my numbers. And I must admit, I've not done this before until I'd seen Graham's article. If you like your numbers or you like your spreadsheets or if Dreamland, if it's both, then make sure you check out this blog that Graham's put together. Of course, we'll cover it in the new podcast, but I think you'll get even more out of it in this particular case if you read it, because it comes with that sexy spreadsheet as well. So next up is a tip from HMO Landlady. And again, it's a similar sort of vein to the first tip I gave, where you put yourself in someone else's shoes. And the tip that Serena, the HMO landlady, gives is that make sure your tenants are on side when you're selling a buy-to-let. Now, Rob and I talk about holding and never selling a buy-to-let, but it may be part of your strategy, whether you feel you pushed into it, whether you feel you've got a bit of a dud on your hand and you want to put it into something more effective. Or maybe that's just your strategy that after a while you're going to sell and liquidate the portfolio. When you're selling a buy-to-let, if it's already tenanted, Serena talks about the process you should go through selling a property in terms of the practical things, but also talks about how open communication, open dialogue with your tenants is so important, especially if you're trying to get them out. Now, you could be hardcore and you could just serve them Section 21, go through the process, never talk to them, get them out, and so on. But actually, if you open communication, give them plenty of notice, talk them through what's going to happen so they know what's going to happen. It takes away that mystery, that unknown. Then it will make their experience a lot better and therefore your experience a lot better. I know that sounds like really, really simple common sense, but actually I know that most investors, most landlords don't do that. Even if you're really hands off, get the letting agent to open that dialogue and give them a forward plan of what's going to happen. I think that open communication, letting them know the future process, will make your life so much easier, because they can't go then, oh, I didn't know, or I didn't know you wanted me out today, or I didn't know this was going to happen, or I'm not ready. If you've told them way in advance of what's going to happen, one, you're putting the property on the market so they can start looking elsewhere. Two, when you get the offer in, to let them know that these are expected timelines. Keep that communication going. It should, it's not guaranteed, but it should make the experience better for both of you.
Yeah, that's what Serena is so great at. Over on her blog and in her book, she talks a lot about how she deals with tenants who are really not easy to deal with, and she manages to deal with them in such a way that she kind of gets them to do what she wants without it really feeling like they're doing what she wants. They feel like it's the best thing for them, and it probably is the best thing for them in most cases as well. There is a real art to it, and hopefully not all tenants are going to be as demanding as some of hers, but definitely communication is the answer. It might seem more efficient to just serve the paperwork and save all the chit-chat, but in fact, there could be a lot more problems if you do it that way. So I really like that advice. So our next tip is from Ian Wallace, who blogs about tax and accountancy matters on the Property Hub. And this is to do with inheritance tax. And the basic message from this post seems to be that you're best off giving it all away while you're still alive. Inheritance tax is sometimes called the voluntary tax. There is a lot that you can do to mitigate against it. But the best thing you can do is to start planning for it early and start making plans both in terms of passing on money well in advance if you don't need it, and you can pass that on to heirs well in advance, and also just having conversations about your plans. The thing that stood out to me from this post was that apparently in the last 5 years, there's been a 700% increase in the number of contested wills, which is like pretty huge. And this is obviously a really bad thing, because when you die, you don't want your family squabbling among themselves over money. And it means that also the main beneficiary from this kind of situation is actually going to be solicitors, because they're going to be representing both sides of the argument and taking a hefty chunk out of your hard-earned money that was meant to be left as you wanted. So what Ian says is make sure that you have open and honest discussions well in advance about what your plans are. So if anyone does feel hard done by it and you decide to leave everything to a cat shelter instead of your wife, you can make sure that discussion is had, and so it won't have to happen through legal channels after you've gone. So not the most cheery tip, perhaps, but it is something that we should probably be thinking about earlier than we all do.
Definitely. I know Ian's blogs are very popular. Tax, although it doesn't sound too exciting, actually, it's one of the most requested topics that we get. So the tax blogs by Ian are very popular. And I know in the podcast, the Property Investment Tips podcast, The tax blogs in particular are going to be really, really useful, and a lot of people will get a lot of information, really useful information, practical information that they can implement to better structure their property portfolios. Okay, and finally, the last tip is from your good self, Rob, and it's, we might be missing a trick by just buying and holding. Rob, please say it ain't so.
I know, but yeah, I knew that I was going out on a limb with this one, but yeah, I think I put a decent argument together.
Yeah, you have. And I think looking at it, we always talk about buy and holding, and, for most reasons, rightly so. But there are, of course, some downsides. So there's a few things. First of all, we've talked about the 18-year property cycle. We talked about how property doubles on average every 9 years. But the 18-year property cycle shows you that at some points that you're probably going to do better than those 9 years, and at some point you're going to do longer. So if you understand the market, and maybe the 18-year property cycle could help you do that, then maybe there's better times to sell right at the top of the market. A very difficult strategy to implement and a bit of a gamble, but if you could do that and you do know that, then it's possible maybe worth selling. Now, Rob points out London, where he feels, and I feel, there could be a correction in a couple of years. So maybe in a year it would be a good time to sell the property we have in the southeastern London. However, Rob does go on right at the end of the blog to say, but I still can't bring myself to sell. And there's other stuff in the blog as well, with property ages and, he does try and balance it out to put a strong case together for why you may want to sell at some point. But good old Rob, you've come back to your senses, and at the end you said you won't sell though, regardless.
Yeah, I know. I've after 800 words or so, clearly I'm not willing to put my money where my mouth is, because it did cross my mind to sell a property in London when the chance arose, because I thought, well, yeah, we must be near the top. The money could work harder elsewhere. But no, in the end, I couldn't quite bring myself to do it. And because the income on that one was really high, I could just remortgage to get my money out and go and put that money to work elsewhere while still holding the property. But yeah, the temptation was there, I must admit. So that is one that I'm sure is going to feature in the new Property Investment Tips podcast at some point as well. So they are just 5 things that we've picked out from the blog, and 5 of the many things that are going to feature in the Property Investment Tips podcast. So again, if at the start you're a bit like, don't know about this, but you're now starting to see the value that's contained in some of these posts, and we're going to be unlocking by putting it into audio form for you, do get over to the iTunes page and subscribe. The easy link is thepropertyhub.net/pit.
There's a mine of information. Oh, you're going to be doing stuff like that over the next... that's just the beginning. I can actually think of more, but I'll drip them out over many podcasts. But please don't let that put you off. Make sure you still get behind it, even with the crappy jokes that we'll still churn out week in, week out. Okay, so back to the serious stuff, and we've got a resource of the week, and we have Hub member Simon Allen to thank, and he's recommended the resource of the week, and the resource of the week is noddle.co.uk, and it's a credit check facility.
Yeah, a credit check facility with an awful name, noddle.co.uk. He actually mentioned it to me. I've completely forgot to follow up on it for a couple of weeks, but then when I did, I was really pleasantly surprised. So the idea is that obviously as an investor, your credit history and your credit rating is really important. And with any of the big companies like Equifax or Experian, you can get for £2 a copy of your credit report, but they don't make it easy. They make it really hard for you to do that, because by law they have to give it to you for £2, but they prefer to pretend to be giving it for you for free, but actually sneakily sign you up for a monthly direct debit for all kinds of spurious stuff. But don't get me started on that. The point is that Noddle actually really does give you free access to your credit report. It's absolutely dead easy. You just need to sign up. You answer a few questions about things like cards you've signed up for in the past and mortgages you've got outstanding to prove that it's you, because only you would know this stuff. And then you can see your full credit report, and you can just log in anytime to see it in full. And it updates it every month as well when new data comes in. So from there, you can just go in and check what everything looks like. So when Simon told me about it, he actually suggested that it's a good habit for investors to, on a monthly basis, put in a recurring calendar reminder to go in and check, because it might be that there's been some kind of miscommunication with a bank or a lender and you've got a missed payment showing, which can cause trouble. Or maybe you've even been the victim of identity fraud and there are accounts showing that you know nothing about. So it's really worth making sure you go in there and correct anything that's wrong before you're in a situation where you're applying for lending and your application gets turned down and you have no idea why. It's not something that's very exciting. It's a bit of a tedious business, but Noddle makes it a heck of a lot easier than it was before. So I think this is a great resource, and I definitely recommend going and signing up, because it's completely free. There's nothing to lose, and it just makes life a lot easier.
It does. It's well worth it. I mean, I'm signed up to Equifax. I'm signed up to Experian, because as Rob said, your credit report, your credit rating is so important as a property investor that you should be on top of it. So I might actually cancel one of those reports, because I'm paying about £30 a month, which is a Sky subscription, Sky package subscription. So I'm going to cancel one of those, and I think I'm going to use my Noddle. Okay. Maybe it's not such a bad name. I'm going to use my Noddle, and I'm going to use that service too, and give it a go, because free, why not?
Absolutely. And you know what else is free, Rob? Saying nice things about the Property Podcast.
It is free, Rob. And it seems that we've had a bit of a surge recently. So thank you to all the people who've got behind the Property Podcast in the past, and to the people who continue to do so. We will always continue to read out the reviews, and this week is no different. Sparky Lou says, serious content delivered in a way that's fun to listen to. Once a week just isn't enough for these podcasts. I can't wait until Thursdays for my next session of informative, easy to listen to, friendly, expert property advice and information. After discovering the podcast a few months ago, I've caught up on the entire back catalogue. The podcast is really helping me on the way to stepping up from just having a couple of properties for a pension to more serious property investing. Big thanks for putting this out there for us. Oh, and the London meetup. Awesome. Well, thank you, Sparky Lou.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. That we absolutely love all the reviews, and we are going to read them out just as we are on the new podcast. So that is about it for this week. There's been loads in there. Important news stories, great resource, loads of tips with links over to all those blogs. With plenty of links and things to follow up on in this episode. You can find them all at thepropertyhub.net/new podcast. And please, 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 Rob is above begging, but I'm not. Go and check out the new Property Investment Tips podcast. You can find that at thepropertyhub.net/pit.
I don't know. Wait till next week. Well, thank you for everyone who has been supporting us for 80 episodes. I hope you enjoyed the new podcast that goes out tomorrow. We're really excited about it. We're going to launch a few episodes all at the same time. So make sure you check it out. thepropertyhub.net/pit. Make sure you go there. I promise you the information does not stink. It's a minefield of... No, sorry. Sorry.
You promised you'd wait.
Okay. I'll leave it there. All I'll say is please get behind it. We're really excited about launching a new podcast. You know, we've only done one together, so this is our second one we've done together. We've done 80 episodes before we've got to our second podcast. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it a useful resource, and we'd love to hear what you think about it. You can comment in thepropertyhub.net. You can leave lovely, nice reviews in iTunes, which we love and adore. Or you can just drop us an email with any suggestions as well. So that's us for another week, Rob. Thank you to everyone who's joined us. We look forward to speaking with you again tomorrow in the new podcast. But until tomorrow, thanks for listening to the Property Podcast, and we'll see you tomorrow in Pit.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.